Okay, now we're starting to get to people that we perhaps know a little better. So as early as 4000 BCE, there were early Greek caves that showed evidence of goddess worship at the town of Delphi. Delphi was north, and now I'm looking north, okay? So it's north and a little bit to the west of the current city of Athens. And of course, you've probably all heard of the oracle at Delphi. It's very interesting because they've done some studies on that recently. And the oracle was supposedly in a chamber below. There were priestesses who handled the visitors who came to Delphi to get answers to their questions. So, you know, am I going to have a boy or a girl? Is my husband going to be faithful to me? Do you think we're going to make a lot of money on the grapes this year? You know, that kind of thing. So they'd go off and they'd pay some money to the goddess, and she would sit over this opening in the earth, and this steam would come up out of it, and she would have a vision. Well, now, just recently I remember reading in the newspaper a while back that they had done some testing on the steam that's coming out of this vent. Did you see that too? Yeah, and she was probably having a really good trip. But she came up with, no, there were a lot of chemicals apparently in it that made it very difficult for, I mean, you couldn't breathe that stuff for a long time. But Delphi was a very strong center of the goddess religion, because the goddess religion existed in Greece as well as the others. It's just that it, you know, as it expanded into the sky gods, it declined in value, but certainly Delphi was very, very important. So the other thing that the Greeks did that was important, or a step forward, is when they moved away from Gaia worship, they started looking at all kinds of gods who had responsibilities for this and that and the other thing, and they created a strong pantheon. So we'll look at the Greek pantheon. I gave you a copy of this in your handouts. Now, this one is going to stand for the Greek, the Roman, the Norse, the Celtic. They're all the same. You know, they've got different names and they've got different relationships. But when the Greeks got it right, all the other cultures that were in place after that said, well, we should have a pantheon of our gods. And it ended up looking very similar. They had people in charge of war and people in charge of peace and people in charge of marriage and on and on and on. And so rather than spend the rest of the whole program here talking about the different ones, we're going to talk about Greece, and then if you want to do more research on it, I think that would be wonderful, but I think you'll find that the other ones are very much the same.
Doesn't it suggest?
Okay, so this is where we're heading, and we're going to get to the sky gods as we get to this part of the world. So we're looking at the Middle East. Here's Egypt. And that is one of the major societies with very strong mythology that we'll be talking about. You'll notice that Egypt is built on the River Nile, and I'm sure you've come across that. And there's a very good description here, or a depiction here, of the delta of the Nile. The Nile was a river that was fed by Lake Victoria in the middle of Africa. And so all this water would run down here, and in the springtime, when there was a lot of rain and a lot of water, it would flood. And so the Nile would flood constantly, and when it hit the end of this period, it broke into this part of the river. It would break into a whole bunch of different little rivers, forming a delta and fanning out. And as a result, this was one of the most fertile areas in the world. Because it constantly flooded every year and regenerated the soil with the floodwaters that went and the silt that it carried went all over the land and kept the land very fertile. So this was great agricultural land in here. One of the best places in the world for the growth of agriculture. And at the same time, we had another society up here in Mesopotamia, and these rivers don't show nearly as well as the Nile, but I'll show you where they are. We have the Tigris coming down on this side, and coming into this delta, and on this side we have the Euphrates River. And these two rivers join here and create a very similar system going into the Persian Gulf as the Nile emptying into the Mediterranean Sea. So we had two extremely fertile areas. And as these warriors, riding warriors, the Aryans, came down from this area above the Black Sea, they headed in here and they began to build societies all around here. Not in Egypt. Egypt was already taken over by the native people, but they built all kinds of societies in here. The main ones that we're going to look at is Assur, which was the head of the Assyrian Empire. It was the first empire there. And Sumer, which also had a bunch of satellite cities, one of which was Babylon. And all of these places were built very rich societies. Now, up to now, what we've been looking at is societies of nomads, right? We've pretty much been looking at nomads. I don't think we've been looking at settled societies anywhere. Now we're going to start to move into the area of settled societies. And the settled societies aren't going to be ruled by a goddess. Oh no, no, we have to have a sky god. So we're going to start moving into the focus on the warrior society and the male-dominated society as we move on. So what happened to the great goddess before, as the sky gods moved in? Well, the Hera and Juno, Hera in Greek and Juno in Roman mythology, pretty much became a nagging wife. And if you read any of the myths around Hera and Juno, and they're let's just treat them as one. We'll just go with Hera, okay? They are the same person with a different name. They were married to the king of the gods, and you know, he saw no reason why he had to stay at home. He was a very difficult guy to have around. So he was constantly having children by different gods or different goddesses, or by humans. He was actually going so far as to do that. And Juno or Hera spent most of their time trying to get back at his partners. There's no point trying to get back at the sky god. He was way too powerful. But they would go on and turned one of the women was turned into a beautiful calf, and so it wasn't an ugly calf, but she was still a cow. No matter how you look at it.
These stories sound like they're very recent.
Don't they? Things haven't changed that much, have they? And on it goes. So Artemis, who is the goddess, the Greek goddess of hunting, she was a virgin goddess, and she really wasn't much interested in guys at all, but she did like to hunt. And she had this fertility kind of effect, because remember, we're talking about the early societies were hunter-gatherers. So far we've looked at Demeter and Persephone, who are the gathering sides, the growth of the plants, and she represented the hunting side. So, but at this point in time, she became very masculinized, and all of a sudden she didn't have any friends or any boyfriends, and she was not looked on kindly for her behavior of going out and hunting. And as I say, she was seen as only a virgin goddess, because if she was going to act like a guy, she sure as heck couldn't be treated like a woman. So the whole mythology changed in their approach to these women as the societies developed into the sky god concept. And so the question I put in here, what would cause the decline of the goddess myth? Well, I think we've got the answer. The societies just changed their whole aspect of looking at life. They were no longer hunter-gatherers. They were now living in cities, and they were, headed by warriors and whatever. They had moved into the modern world.